For a bit of background information, this actually happened to one of my mom's friends, and this actually took place in 2013. Now, to cut to the chase, this happened to one of my mom's friends, which, for the privacy reasons, we'll call her Kim. Kim was a mom of two kids of herself, and her kids were about 17 and 21. Now, Kim was alone in one house as two of her kids have gone out for New Year's. So, ever since her husband and her had a divorce, Kim had been alone with her kids, but of course, with her job being decent, she was able to afford the house. Now, she only had her dog, which was a Rottweiler named Jasmine, and Jasmine was about 2 years old. They had gotten her from the shelter, and Jasmine was the sweetest Rottweiler you've ever seen. Now, Kim's oldest kid was out with his girlfriend, while her youngest kid was 17, was staying over at a friend's house for New Year's. Now, since Kim was alone, she didn't really have to worry about so much, as the area she lived in was a pretty quiet neighborhood. However, Kim was making herself something to eat, and it was around closer to midnight, maybe about an hour before midnight. Jasmine then started growling at the door. At first, Kim thought that maybe she might have been barking at some animal, probably a squirrel or something running around. We do get little critters at times, so that was uncommon. Of course, when Kim was busy making herself some spaghetti, Jasmine Sparks started becoming more aggressive and more defensive. She went over to look, as Jasmine doesn't usually bark unless she sees someone or something outside. Jasmine ended up looking over and looked outside the door, but she saw nobody was there. Jasmine still kept barking and growling, and this honestly concerned her now. She obviously looked around her car, but to her surprise, she found no one hiding. This was starting to get strange. Kim texted her son and daughter, asking them if they were home, or at least they were playing a trick. They said no, and they were still over at a friend's house, so it wasn't really that big of an issue. But this got concerned now. Kim obviously knew that someone was definitely playing a trick, so she went back inside to call her neighbors. Her neighbors said they didn't even were over they weren't even over there, and this was concerning Kim now. Then she looked up to see that there was a man standing at the front of her door, banging on it loudly as Jasmine started barking. The bark soon started to get more aggressive, so Kim ended up grabbing Jasmine and hurried up the stairs and calling the 911. As she was on the phone, she heard the door break down, followed by glass smashing, and that she ended up hearing the man walking inside the house. She was praying to God and hoped the cops would be there soon, while Jasmine was still growling, knowing that the intruder is still downstairs. Within a few moments, it was over, as there were sirens in the distance and people running in claiming to be the police, and there was even some yelling, gunshots, and etc. Of course, one of the officers walked up to the door where Kim was hiding and knocked on it and said that it was the cops and that they have caught the man and arrested him. Kim had no idea who this man was when they asked her if she knew him, and she said no, as she had no idea. They asked her if her kids were home, and she said no, as they were out for New Year's. This man was wanted for breaking into houses and stealing people's jewelry. She even assaulted a woman who was around Kim's age, but ended up killing her after beating her to death. This story still haunts Kim to this day, and Kim is glad that freaky man is arrested, and she hopes he stays in prison, because there's a special place in hell where he belongs. This took place in 2018 in in New Year's Eve. Now, this happened to one of my friends, which we'll call her Lindsay. Lindsay was living with her parents, and of course, they were having a New Year's party, which Lindsay invited at least two of her friends from high school who she went to high school with at the time. Now, they moved into the area where I grew up in. I'm not going to say the town where she was from or where she's at, but let's just say here are her high school friends, which we'll call them Casey and Melissa. Melissa and Casey were very good friends. Casey was the guy that likes to do football and likes anything to do with sports. Melissa was just a common girl who likes makeup and other accessories. Now, however, this happened in New Year's Eve. Lindsay's parents were gone out to go get some food and stuff, as most of the places were going to be closed early due to Christmas break. But of course, at the same time, though, the hours were different due to certain holidays. As it was at nighttime, they decided they would go out and play in the snow for a little while in the woods in the backyard. Now, the woods is fenced in, so that would mean to keep the kids in there in the yard and keep all animals as well. Of course, Lindsay's dad built like a makeshift gate, which will allow them to go in and out of the woods, but they know the rules such as stay near the woods on the path, do not go far without anybody knowing, and etc. Lindsay was very good with these rules, and same thing with her friends. As Casey and Melissa decided that they would play flashlight tag in the snow, it was a clear night sky, and the glow of the moon was just big enough to let out anything inside. Now, as Lindsay and the others were playing a game of flashlight tag, they were having fun on New Year's Eve. Lindsay was running as far as she could, but when she got farther away from the house, she realized that there was a bit of an open field, followed by with some trees. Of course, they were covered in snow. Some had ice covered, which that meant they had freezing rain the day before. It wasn't that big of a deal. Lindsay all of a sudden looked up and see what appears to be something in the woods behind some really big deadfall. Now, at first she thought that it could have been maybe a coyote or perhaps a bear in the area, so she started walking slowly towards it. But as she got closer, she honestly could see that the creature or whatever it was about 15 feet in front of her, and it was about maybe 4 feet tall, and it was hunched over on its back, and it had an oval-shaped head. Lindsay immediately ran back the way she came, and as soon as she got back to their house, her friends were there and wondered where she was. Lindsay said that she was in the woods and was waiting for them, when all of a sudden she explains about this creature. Now, honestly, she said that it appeared to be at least 4 feet tall or something. She was able to get a picture of it before it took off and before she ran out. Now, she showed her friends, Melissa and Casey, the photo. They obviously did not tell the parents or anybody else closer to them and family members because they were afraid that Lindsay would not be believed in. Now, this was honestly very freaky, seeing that Lindsay probably might have imagining things or whatever she saw was real. At first, when her friends saw the photo, they thought that it could have been a coyote with mange of some sort. But when they looked, they saw that it looked like no coyote. It looked too human-like to be a coyote. What they eventually looked over and they researched the picture and they gasped. Still to this day, Lindsay still gets frightened by this one New Year's Eve. It wasn't a creature that known to men, but she doesn't know if it was the Dover demon or the rake. Fake, but of course, those stories where Lindsay told, she thought that there were just some myths and folklore that people tell. But after this experience, they pretty much don't know what to believe in. In New Year's Story, in New Year's Eve in 2014, this took place in Nevada to one of my best friends, which we'll call him Jake. Jake had moved from Canada to Nevada as his mom and dad had got a divorce. So, due to his dad being on drugs and being an alcoholic and does really messed up things verbally and physically, Jacob, or at least Jake for short, ended up moving to Nevada. Now, in 2014, since this took place in New Year's Eve, Jake was going to go hunting with his mom, as they had been hunting and hiking for a couple years now. During the events, Jake was about maybe 17 or 18 years old, so this honestly really petrified him on New Year's Eve. I know that it was usually uncommon for them to go hunting at this time, but they decided to why not give it a shot, as it was during the winter and there would not be anybody really out. Now, this was before the New Year's party that they were going to, so they decided to go see if they could do some hunting. They ended up ice fishing for a bit, but most of the creek was frozen, so they couldn't really go fishing. Most of the animals were in hibernation as well, but they ended up looking over to see that there was a trail not far from where the nearest watchtower was. Jake ended up looking over to see that there was what appears to be an elk of some sort. It was the largest elk that they had ever seen, and they honestly had no idea if it was an elk or not. They decided to move closer to the elk so they could get a better shot at it and a better chance at killing it. When they got closer enough, they hid around behind a small rock. Not really a too tiny rock, but a small rock where it could cover him and his mom. Whatever it was let out a loud scream, and Jake ended up looking up to see that the deer ended up standing on its hind legs, which was in an abnormal position. It wasn't a deer at all, but it looked like a person. It was a skinwalker. Obviously, the most terrifying thing that happened on New Year's Eve was something Jacob had never thought he'd experience. His mom, along with them waited for the creature to disappear. Then they ran back to their car. They never tell this story to anybody in their family, even the ones that do have hunting experience, as they were afraid that nobody would believe them. Still to this day, they still wonder what this creature was doing and what it wanted. But during their hunting times, as they still hunt in Nevada, they had never saw it again.